I'm Emily, welcome to or back to my channel. I'm going to film a Cambridge Q&A or a university Q&A in general. I've been getting lots of questions from you all, so thank you so much to everyone who has sent in a question on YouTube or Instagram. So to begin with, a lot of people have asked, what am I studying? And so I'm a master's student in the English faculty and I study creative writing. My master's is 2 years and I've just completed my first year, and my second year is going to be all completely dissertation based pretty much. So I am heading into that soon, and I had to just choose what genre and what form I'm going to be working in and my supervisor, and I just yesterday got confirmation of my supervisor, which I'm very happy about. And I chose to do screenwriting, so I'm going to be writing a feature film for the next year. So I can give some information into my experience at Cambridge. Obviously it won't apply to everything because I'm not an undergrad and my program's a little bit smaller and less traditional. I can still talk from my experience, and I've spent time in Cambridge and I've got friends in different programs. I've spent time in different colleges, so I hope I can answer your questions well. This question was to ask about how academics are in Cambridge, and obviously, as you might expect, it's quite intense and quite rigorous. The grading system was quite a surprise for me coming from American undergrad into a British master's program. It's completely different, and at Cambridge in particular, I really like the academic rigor because it's based in deep reading and in-depth conversation, and so I really like that. Yeah, obviously, as you would expect, it is quite intense, but if you put a lot of focus into it, I think you can enjoy it quite a lot. And I did prioritize academics this year. You've basically got to be really dedicated and really diligent with your studies and just keep on top of it and not let it get, away from you, which hopefully by the time you get to uni you've kind of practiced. But there's so many other things to be doing in Cambridge, so you just have to maintain your focus on a consistent level. And also I found, at least for my program, it was really important to do reading when I wasn't in class. During the summer, do as much reading as you can because you're going to be given really long reading lists and you're not going to be able to get through everything. So try and get a head start on it, but also do your own reading in your own interests, and just try to read as widely, as deeply and as uniquely as possible, because you don't necessarily want to read all the mainstream things. You want to stretch out into your niche, and then you want to focus into areas that are really specific, and as your studies go on you'll start to figure that focus out a little bit more. And also keep a list of everything you've read and everything you want to read. When you're doing notes for your essay, keep on top of it because it gets very extensive, so you just want to be very organized. And if you are, then you should have a good time. And it's intense, but everyone else is in the same boat as you, so you can kind of motivate each other, which is really good. So somebody asked to hear about more information about my dissertation. So for me, I have to write a creative component and a critical component, and it has to be in my chosen form, which is screenwriting. I've chosen to do a film, and then I'll have to write a critical essay on that creative piece that I write within the kind of landscape of the form and genre that I'm working in. So I haven't figured that part out exactly yet, and I'm still deciding. I'm probably going to spend the whole summer trying to kind of brainstorm different ideas and see what I'm most interested in writing about for my film. I'm making mood boards, gathering my ideas and inspiration, so I'm in that kind of phase at the moment. I'm really looking forward to it. I feel good and I feel excited to kind of be focused on one project and one piece of work, rather than in this year, the first year, we kind of spent time moving between forms from poetry to fiction, non-fiction and screenwriting or performance writing. So it will be nice to just kind of have a whole year on one project, and it was good to also have the time to explore and experiment in different genres as well. People have asked, what is the Cambridge experience like? And I feel like it's a little bit hard to put into words, but the best way I can describe it is everything you experience in the outer world is what you experience in Cambridge too. It's just that it becomes a little bit more intensified because the town is pretty small and there's a lot of young people there, and there's a lot of people studying and all in the same place, and Cambridge isn't very big. It's a big university, there's 31 colleges, and it pretty much takes up and spans the whole entire town, but that whole town isn't big. It's smaller than Oxford for sure. I've heard from people that they're intimidated to apply to Cambridge or intimidated to start there, and I think everybody's just like you. and you're just in this like hyper real environment. It's unusual to be in a place where everyone's so focused and so passionate and so interested in what they're studying and doing, and I quite enjoyed that. And everyone's just normal people, and it is a normal town. It just so happens that it's a university town, so it's like a fishbowl. Everything you experience in the outside world happens in there. It just gets amplified in intensity because it is a small town. And every time you go out, you're seeing the same people everywhere. You can pretty much walk through the town. You don't really have to get public transport most of the time. You get used to it quite quickly. It takes like a week to figure out your way around and feel like you know where you are, and that feels really good once you get into that flow, and like once you start to explore the colleges and everything, it feels really like you're starting to get to know the place. What else is it like? It's hard to explain. So I think my perception of it was different to how it really felt once I got there, and you build it up in your mind into all these kind of things, and then in some ways it completely exceeded my expectations, and in other ways I was like felt disillusioned at first when I got there, and then I felt like once I got to know it more, it was better than I ever imagined it being. I would say because of the pressure of like the academics and of being in this small town, everything gets amplified, like all the good and all the bad, or all the negative and positive aspects of just growing up, just being like in your 20s and your teens. For me, it was a whole new academic system because I'd studied my undergrad in America, and it was so like the grading system is so completely different, and it's really confusing at the beginning, and so you're like navigating a whole new world academically, but also in real life too, because it is a very different environment to anything I'd experienced. It may or may not be for you. It's so old, and like everywhere you walk, you're kind of just in awe at times by the history of the place, not just in like the architecture and physically, but also in the ideas that started there and the people that studied there and people who taught there. And also it wasn't that long ago that women were actually allowed into the university as students, so there's a really interesting history there, and as a woman studying there, like that's something that's often in my mind. And I'm thinking about how like Virginia Woolf's brother studied there, and she got to teach there, and you know, getting to study there now, there's this huge legacy that came before you. So it's a very rich environment, very enriching environment, but also a very weighted environment in terms of history and in terms of everything. So there's a lot there to kind of dig into. If I was to describe the town, I think it's very beautiful. When I first visited, I didn't really understand the beauty because I came in like this time last year in the summer. It felt completely different to what it felt like during university time, but it is really pretty. Really beautiful town. It's about 45 minutes to an hour on the train from London, so it's pretty accessible, but it's a bit longer if you drive, and I would say it's what you make of it. I got asked by a lot of you who are about to start at Cambridge for any kind of tips or advice, and I would just say, as I said, it wasn't what I expected when I first arrived, and so until you get your student card, access to anything is kind of limited, so you can't really know what you're going to experience until you really get into university time, and then everything opens up to you. And don't just stick to your college. In the first month at Cambridge, you can go to Freshers Week and see what kind of societies you're involved in getting into. I didn't really get involved in too many societies, but I have friends who did. You make friends in that way. There's a huge theatre culture in Cambridge where students write, develop, produce, direct, act in plays, and I ended up getting more involved in like the production side of things there. I would say don't overcommit, especially in your first few terms, but get involved and see like what you're excited about and what you want to do. A lot of these things are a great way to try something that you might be interested in but had never kind of given a go before. So I got to be like a publicist at the Marlowe Art Show, and that was really interesting for me. It showed me like what I enjoyed about that role, what I didn't, and it's a good way to dip your toe into something. But really don't overcommit, because the academics are intense, as you would expect, and I mean that's why you're there. So at least for me, I wanted to put most of my focus into studies and academics and my own kind of development of my projects, and then with extra time I could do these extracurricular or society or theatre things that were exciting to me. And then on top of that, you're also making friends. It's a really social time in your life, and it's a really social environment. I really didn't know what to expect, and one thing that kind of exceeded my expectations was the emphasis on social events and dinners and everything, and that's not just students, it's also with your professors, at least for me. And I don't know if this happens as much with undergrads. I know that in your colleges you dine, and there's like often a high table where the fellows or professors will sit, but then for me in my program, I would have like intensive modules, and during that time all guest speakers or authors all the professors that were there with us would sit at the table with us, and we would have meals together. We'd have lunch and dinner every day during the module, and so that was really interesting to me. I didn't expect that, and it really is like such a huge part of my Cambridge experience, was having these dinners with professors and with my classmates and with other students, going to events where you're meeting different people in like the film society, or even just going to like garden parties, English faculty events, and all sorts of things. There's so much that goes on, and it really crosses over between fellows and students and professors at certain times. It really teaches you how to kind of talk about your work and your studies, and like obviously I'm super curious about what everyone else is doing, so you get to learn a lot from your professors, from the fellows, from the students, and then you're also expected to kind of be able to talk about what you're doing too, and that is a good practice for the real world as well. So I think that has been a huge part of my educational experience and social experience while I've been there. There's also the formals and these fun kind of events where you wear your robes and have the dinners and all of those kind of things. So there's a lot that goes on that you can be a part of while you're there. I would say make a choice about what you want to invest your energy into, because there is so much, and when you start there you're going to kind of be like, I was overwhelmed by all these different things that could take up my time and attention, all these different things I was excited about, but at the end of the day you're not there to do everything. You're there to kind of just be specific and particular about what you want to invest your time and energy into, and sometimes like choosing a few is better than trying to do everything all at once. At least that's how I feel. There's also 3 terms in the year, and there's a time in the year where it gets really cold and really dark, and I don't know if for any of you who are like moving to England for the first time, who haven't spent much time here, England gets really dark really early. That time in the year everyone gets a little bit exhausted and things get a little bit crazy. For me and for like friends at that time of year leading up to Christmas, it was probably the roughest time. I think it was just like everything catches up with you because you're getting involved in all these things. Everything's so new, and then it gets really cold, and you're also trying to maintain your focus on your studies, and it gets to that time of year and you're getting up to the end of this first term, and there's parties and there's balls. There's so much that goes on, so just pace yourself, because you get to December and you can be quite exhausted by that point. Feel almost burnt out, and that's pretty normal. So you want to try and like do self-care throughout all the terms, especially that first one. There's just so much you're adjusting to, and there's so much new things going on, and the weather and the darkness and the cold is all a lot to kind of handle. Like once you go on holiday, just chill for a moment, see if you can take a tiny bit of a break. I couldn't really do that much, but whatever you can do is good, and then you can come back more fresh in February. So don't be alarmed if things feel a little bit heavy, a little bit difficult by December, because you just probably need a break at that point. And also everyone's kind of adjusting too, so everyone's in like an interesting place in that first term, I would say, and like figuring out how they belong in this world that they found themselves in, and you are too, so it's quite normal to have a lot go on at that time. Just be prepared as well for the kind of culture shock that happens when you come to Cambridge, because it was built on a class system. It did operate from this like very hierarchical place, and there's still that kind of thing that occurs with like different colleges and like where you're allowed to get in and where you're not, and so navigating all that can be quite strange too. I grew up in England as a kid, but it was still a different culture to like my undergrad experience. I did my undergrad at the New School in New York, which is such a different environment and has a different mindset to Cambridge, and I really enjoyed the two and the contrast of them, and I'm glad I did it in that order as well. So a really big tip is bring every piece and item of formal clothing that you own, because you're gonna need it. Like, you don't realize, but you will need it, and I did not know that was a thing. Obviously I brought like 1 or 2 dresses, but then I found the need for a lot more than that. And there's also events that are like black tie week. For men you have to wear a bow tie, and for us women we have to wear long dresses to the floor, heels, all of that kind of thing, or traditional dress. Be prepared for all that and make sure you bring it with you, and just keep an open mind, because you're going to experience and be given the chance to experience all sorts of things and like have your mind kind of open in all sorts of ways, and you're going to meet really interesting people, which I think that was probably one of the highlights for me, is like meeting really interesting professors, guest speakers, fellows, and people that just like talk at the university, but also really interesting classmates and students amongst the university in general. So most people are doing something really fascinating, and some of them are like completely in a different field to you, and it's just really interesting to learn about like astrophysics from a PhD student. You learn so much from the people that you're with, and Cambridge is a place that really emphasizes discussion, reading, and just like deep engagement in topics. So so you're having lots of conversations, and I think that everyone who kind of comes there partly gets in because they have a desire to have these kind of conversations and delve really deeply into topics. So that means it's really fun when you're in your program and you're able to talk with all these students about your specific interests and who are all so passionate about this field that you've chosen. Everyone in the program has chosen to be here because we all want to be writers and we all want to do creative writing, but it's really cool because everybody has really niche interests, really specific passions, and so even though you're operating in the same kind of sphere, your world really opens up because of all the conversations you have. My reading has expanded so much, and we really love talking about books and films and all these things, and it's so much fun. So just be open to all the new experiences you're going to have, because it's super exciting. It is a little bit intimidating before you start because you've built it up in your mind in a certain way, but just know you're gonna find your way and you're gonna find your footing. And yes, there's gonna be high highs and low lows, and everything gets really amplified once you're in the university because it's so small and you see everyone everywhere, but once you get to know it, it feels really familiar and really cozy. So that's some of my tips, but I'll have more for you soon. I'm gonna think about it more, and when I think of more things, I will pop back on here. But I have to go now to a fashion event, and I will be back soon.